a venture capitalist. I like to call it adventure capitalist because you're just going on these adventures with founders and hope they work out. But basically, let's say you had a startup idea and you wanted to go and see if you can get funding because you think it could be the next 100 million or $1 billion company. VCs just basically say, okay, well, based on the traction you currently have, based on the revenue or lack of revenue you have, we're willing to value your company at XYZ amount and give you XYZ dollars for a certain amount of stake in that company. But at the end of the day, a VC as a whole is just a person who is taking other rich people's money and investing that money for them with the goal of getting a return that would outperform the S&P 500 or other large kind of conglomerate ecosystems. One of the interesting terms in VC that I picked up from another like really successful venture capitalist, Geoffrey Wu, he actually built like a VC fund with Logan Paul and Jake Paul for this specific purpose of like capturing audience and attention, then using that to parlay in the rounds. Like they invested in like Ramp, they invested in OpenAI, like tons of companies. But the whole idea behind it is you really want to focus in on how you can get into the highest value, best startup rounds. And the only way you can do that is through content. But as a VC, your goal is to, say, hey, I think we can outperform other places that you could put your money. And then they go out to a bunch of billionaires and say, hey, can you give me money? So the same way a founder is trying to raise money from a VC goes out and raises money from limited partners or LPs. And these LPs are basically people operating larger funds for billion-dollar investors, like people who own absurd companies, like people you probably would never see, but they own like Picassos and Basquiat's and other shit just because like they have so much money, they don't know what to do with it.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that too? Like I assume some of what you're talking about there are like family offices. Can you describe what that is to someone who's never heard that term or understand anything about that?
Yeah, so the term family office is basically if you had to go look at Kobe Bryant's estate and you would say maybe Kobe has made, I don't know, off of all of his stuff, maybe billions of dollars. Well, someone, let's say Kobe had his own family office before he passed, which I'm sure he did. Someone would basically be a fund manager for that family office. And their goal or focus would have to be, can we go and deploy a percentage of his capital and get him X amount of return over X amount of years? So a family office is basically just an in-house capital deployment vehicle for billionaires and very high net worth individuals. So somebody like, I'm sure Elon Musk might have a family office. Like pretty much every billionaire, even if you don't see them or know them, has a family office. But the thing people struggle with is like, oh my God, how do you get in touch with these family offices? I mean, no one's walking around on the street with a big sign that says, hey, I'm the family office for Michael Jackson's estate, and I have $50 million to deploy into, venture funds. So a lot of the times the big cat and mouse game is how do you find a family office? And then how do you actually get on their radar? Because a lot of them like to invest in these like early emerging fund managers, but it is a process. You got to play the Silicon Valley dance, as we call it, where you're going out, you're meeting people, you're sharing your investment thesis. Like just to give you like a high level, and I call this like investment arbitrage. If you're like an investor with like little capital or very little capital, meaning you're cutting like anywhere from like $1,000 checks to 10K, one of the best things you can do right now in the market is actually find startup founders that are looking to apply to accelerators. An accelerator is basically like a startup school where they invest in your company. But what a lot of people don't know, and some of the best ways to build an investment track record for venture, is you kind of want to get multiples. Like you want to get multiples on your investment. So an example of this is 3 months ago, I was in San Francisco. I came across this really dope founder. He told me a story. I invested like measly couple $1,000s in his company because I'm just like, all right, bro has an idea. He has no product, no nothing. Like he literally was just on a backpack, quit his job in New York, moved to San Francisco and was like, I'm going to build this thing. And I was like, all right, I'm going to cut you like a check for a couple $1,000s. A couple of weeks ago, actually like last week, same founder gets into Y Combinator. So I invested in this founder at a 1 mil cap valuation in terms of like meme coins or crypto tokens. Think of valuations in the same. If you invest in something at a 1 mil valuation and it goes up to a 50 mil valuation, you now have a 50x multiple on your investment. Now, it's not as liquid, right? I can't move in and out of that investment initially, but that sort of track record is what you kind of want to build up, because when you're going to talk to a fund, an LP, and you say, hey, like I have a 50x multiple on this, they're gonna be like, oh man, like this guy has like very good attention to detail to understanding how do you source early stage founders, right? And that is how you start building up that resume, where a fund would be like, okay, Ben, like you've shown that you've gotten X amount of multiples, X amount of companies you've invested in have gone on to raise hundreds of millions of dollars and they're crushing it. Sure, I'll give you 3, 5, $10 million for your investment fund. So I know it's a lot to take in there, but I try to break it down in a way that was a bit simple for anybody who has like limited experience in venture.
I think that's super helpful. And the question that I have off of that is, if I'm the entrepreneur
Yeah.
in the age of indie hacking, why pursue VC?
So I
what is
tell a
indie
lot of
hacking?
people, as someone who raised money previously, and I'll get like a little bit detailed. When I raised money back in 2021, I mean, I was easily on top of the world, like number one in the crypto and gaming intersection of that space. The space was like how AI is right now. Like everyone
Mm.
thought it was going to be the next big thing. And we were raising money, raising money, raising money. Eventually we closed at $4.5 million. And what a lot of people don't realize is that like to really want to raise money and understand whether or not you should raise money, you need to decide what game you're playing. If you're playing the Silicon Valley venture game, you are basically saying, I am trying to take a swing for a home run to hit the ball out of the park into the galaxy. But like, it's normally an all or nothing thing. It's either like you hit a crazy home run, or like 90% of these founders, when they exit their companies, they're actually exiting at a loss. Only the 10% that you actually see that exit are at getting some sort of significant gain. Normally it's like you're getting acqui-hire. So all of that equity you have, like if we raised $4.5 million at a $30 million valuation. I own 33% of the company. I'm a paper millionaire at that time. You can't do anything with it, right? Like it's
Mm.
not liquid. So for a lot of indie hackers, and the way I'm building my own companies right now is I tell people, build as much leverage as possible, unless your idea is so significantly difficult to build that like you need venture funding, meaning you're doing something with space tech, biotech, like absurd stuff. You should really focus on like, how do you just scale an idea that like doesn't need venture funding? Because you could take, I'm gonna be honest, you put $500 on any of these vibe coding platforms, the Replits, the Bolts, whatever the case is, you can scale, whether it's a mobile app, a web app, and start making your first dollar very quickly. One of the things that I would highly recommend, anyone who's looking to like say like I want to become like a digital entrepreneur, go check out a company called Bending Spoons. They own some of the most absurd apps some of which you've heard of, some of which you haven't. But they're basically like if you took private equity, but made it like something that just started out with 4 or 5 different developers and they started just building apps, acquiring apps and scaling them. That's a better model for most people because, I mean, think about it. If you get to a couple hundred K a month in revenue off of your own apps, and you own, let's say 80% of that is just pure profit, like what the hell can't you buy? You can take
Yeah.
one check, go buy the Porsche, another check, put the down payment on the house, and just continue scaling whatever you want. A lot of founders don't understand that they don't actually need to go after venture to make lots of money. But if you are playing the venture game, you're playing the $1 billion or bust game. Yeah, you might get acqui-hired at a couple hundred million, but like for an investor, they don't give a damn unless you think and believe truly that the idea you're working on is a $1 billion idea. So I see a lot of founders that will come up to me and be like, oh my God, I have this crazy idea. And I'm like, as someone who's gone through it, I would highly recommend most founders shouldn't go venture initially unless you truly understand the expectation that comes with it.
That's so good, man. And as the VC guy saying that, like that says a lot for sure. I think that nuance really matters here, and that knowing what you're getting yourself into is really, really big. The question that I had off of that is, what is the biggest lie that VCs tell founders?
Oh man, that's a good one. I would say the biggest lie VCs tell founders is in relation to where they are from a product perspective. So, like, let's say you're pitching me your company and I'm not interested. One of the things VCs love saying is like, "Oh, you're too early." Like, come on, like the term "too early" is just like a basic way of saying, "Hey, we're really not that interested, but like we want to let you down in a way that like makes you feel like there's still something here." Another thing that I hear actually quite often is VCs will actually come out and be like, oh yeah, we're an early stage VC. We invest in companies pre idea, pre start, like pre everything. Like you don't even have to have your docs incorporated, but we're so early that we'll invest in you. 9 times out of 10, these VCs, a lot of them do not have the balls to invest in a company pre-seed, pre-idea. And they say that as kind of like, I would say like almost natural selection of like, yeah, maybe they would look at a deal like that. But in oftentimes, unless you fit a certain archetype, like transparently, you were an excellent engineer at a Fortune 500 and you like are like trying to do something different because you found some sort of obscure niche problem and you're like, we think this is a crazy B2B idea, or you have the Ivy League pedigree, or you're just like insanely cracked. A lot of VCs aren't going to invest in you pre-idea because we've entered this moment where MVPs without traction in some cases are actually like a negative signal. Like if a founder came up to me tomorrow and he's like building an app that could be vibe coded, like the first version could be vibe coded. And he's like, hey, I want you to invest in my company, be an angel investor. The first thing I'm thinking is like, so you mean to tell me you spent more time on this deck than you did going out and actually seeing this thing could actually make a couple dollars?
Yeah.
Or like if people actually give a damn about this thing. I'm like,
yeah. What does
you
that
have
mean?
AI. When I started coding 6 years ago, 7 years ago, there was no AI. Like we just had to sit there
And
and figure
grind.
this stuff out. That's why if you look at a lot of the early companies that like became billion-dollar companies, it'd be stuff like, we're building DoorDash where you can get food right to your door.
Mm.
Technically, that's not a difficult app to build today because AI, you
The
could one
feature
shot
scope's
that,
not hard. Yeah.
right? Like you could one shot it. But back then, to be an engineer and put all that stuff together, there was like
Nightmare.
this sort of skill gap. So now the skill gap isn't really technical for a lot of ideas from a software perspective. The skill gap is actually more so your ability to go out and show, I can get distribution, I can get sales, or I can build a narrative that shows that people actually want this thing.
Totally. That's so good. I want to provide some definitions for people who aren't in this world because Bryce, you and I are in this every day. We
Yeah.
talk about this stuff. We say a lot of buzzwords, right? So MVP stands for minimum viable product, guys. So that stands like the least thing that you can do to prove the concept, essentially. Vibe code is using AI tools to perform software engineering. That could be building something from scratch. That could be improving something you already have. It's using the tools of AI to make software engineering substantially easier. Indie hacker is somebody who didn't get funding and is pursuing their business through the practice of what's called bootstrapping for the most part, where you're building something by yourself. You're not taking on external funding. You're using tools, you're being scrappy, and you're building it. And then distribution is a term that Bryce mentioned. That's just like eyeballs. So distribution is like awareness, content, people seeing your stuff. So that should bring everyone up to speed.
I appreciate you doing that because sometimes I'll go on these rants
I do too,
and I'll
man.
completely like just miss it.
I do too. Keith, do you have any questions off of that?
What do you think are some of the alternative paths that a founder could take to getting capital if they felt like they needed it, but like you said, probably shouldn't go the VC route?
So there is the aspect of starting small, which is like you kind of try to raise the necessary amount of capital you need to get the idea off the ground. And I recommend founders all the time, if you want to go the VC route, but you kind of want to dabble in before you say, hey, I actually want to go try to raise from a VC, you want to try to get angel investors. And basically an angel investor is someone who is willing to put up early stage capital for startups before VCs come in. So basically they're the people, and that's kind of where I sit right now, where it's like, I'm looking for the next interesting startup to throw, $5,000-$10,000 into, and be one of the first checks in. So if it is a great idea, I can get that multiple. But angel investors aren't holding you to the same kind of standard that a VC might hold you to in terms of like, hey, yes, I want this to be $1 billion company, but I'm not going to breathe down your neck and try to run your business for you. So a lot of startup founders, if like your idea needs 50K, 75K to get off the ground, you probably should just try to go raise money from angel investors. And I have like a lot of videos on my IG and TikTok that show ways that you can get in touch with them. But also just trying to see if you can find like private business investors. Like there was an idea that I looked at not too long ago where someone was like, he was trying to build like almost like pickleball chains, like a chain of pickleball locations. And I was like, it's a cool idea. It's not venture fundable, but you probably could find like private investors that are non-angel or non-VC related that would invest in stuff that might not fit the venture landscape. The problem is most people just think, oh man, I need to get investment capital because I have an idea, and they only look at venture, right? So, I mean, another cool thing, it's a lot harder, but like build relationships with banks. Like uh, it's so underrated because most people like never walk into a bank, but if you can build a decent relationship with a bank or with just private investors who've made a ton of money doing something and like are like, oh man, I want to be a part of someone else's journey to help watch them build something pretty incredible, you can get capital at much better values, better terms than going the VC route. So I would highly recommend like people just try to get creative and understand that banks exist. Yes, it might be a loan, but depending on what you're doing and if you can show that the business model makes sense, it makes more sense for you to take out that loan and work with a bank than it does to try to go the venture route. Because a lot of companies do this thing where they'll go raise venture funding, but the problem they run into is the idea actually isn't good enough. So they end up being in this place where they might have a little bit of traction, but they raise $10 million at a 100 mil valuation. It's like, yeah, to keep scaling beyond that, you got to show significant revenue numbers and be growing at light speed. And a lot of people aren't ready for the expectation of an investor being like, hey, you're not growing fast enough. We don't care anymore. We're not going to pay much attention to you. Go get acqui-hired by this company that's 8 times bigger than you because like it's just not working.
Mm. What are some of the terms, by the way, that a VC might bring to a founder that founders don't think about, but that could completely screw them over?
Terms that they could bring. So the first one I would say, I don't know about terms, but I would say more so just along the lines of, and this is actually very good because we are in this kind of bull cycle for AI, is founders not understanding valuation. I think that's like the biggest issue a lot of founders run into. Valuation and probably board seats, right? Like, so when I was building my startup, we were optimizing to raise as much money as possible. Horrible idea. And we also like optimized for like the VC that gave us the best valuation. Like, to be completely transparent, they were like probably one of the worst partners I've ever worked with. Even though they gave us the best valuation, best terms, best everything, versus if I had just gone with another VC that was like offering like slightly better, like slightly worse terms, but like I would say a better support system. I think founders struggle with understanding like, oh my God, I want to keep as much equity as possible. And that whole idea of like, I don't want to dilute myself too much and like give VCs too much of my business. But in the earliest of days, you actually don't need as much equity as you think you need, right? Like if you own 30% of a $100 million company, like you're going to do very well. 2 or 3 or 4 percentage points from 10% diluting 10% to diluting 15% isn't going to change that much. So from my perspective, what I try to tell a lot of founders to do is like, do not try to raise at the highest valuation possible. Yes, I know you want to keep as much equity, but you want to be able to grow into the number. If you raise at a crazy amount, those VCs are going to have the expectation that like, oh, you have it all figured out. You have it all figured out, and you're going to be able to execute upon the expectations of how high your valuation is. So you put yourself in a box, in a bracket where you have little wiggle room or leeway to like screw up. Another analogy that I love using because I'm a huge like football fan, not just like American football, but like European football, is like you'll notice it when a player signs like a crazy contract. Mohamed Salah at Liverpool is going through this right now. He signed like this crazy contract in the offseason. They're paying him like $400,000 every single week to play football, but he's not scoring this year. So after 6 months of signing this new contract, Liverpool is like, yo, you're not living up to expectations and your contract is through the roof. We're trying to sell you basically. So he basically got benched. They're trying to freeze him out the team, all this stuff. Well, VC, in a sense, even though it doesn't work the same way, the mindset is still similar. You raise at a lower valuation, you get better VCs and mentorship around you. You're going to build a healthier cap table for the long run versus optimizing for valuation. And a lot of times, VCs that really, really want into your round, and especially if it's like one of these hot rounds, they will give you higher valuations just so they can lead. But unless you are like a true dog and you know that you can live up to it, a lot of times founders really crumble under that pressure. It happens to a lot of YC companies as well, right? Like, yeah, everyone sees when a company like becomes $1 billion company, like Kalshi, for example, they did Kalshi. Kalshi's worth like $10 billion. YC made a crazy return on that. But there are tons of YC companies that raise at 20, 25, 30 mil valuations, and they're making no money, no revenue, just raising at crazy numbers because they were in Y Combinator, and like that's what you're supposed to do. But the problem that comes in is who's going to give you capital after that? If you raise at a crazy valuation and then you run out of money and you're like, we need to raise
You're
more,
cooked.
yeah, and raise at a down round, you're now the ugly stepchild of venture. Like basically every VC that invests in you is just going to write you off and move on because like you raised at a down round. So I think there is something to say about understanding the expectation that comes with the price tag. And if you cannot live up to that expectation, you put yourself in a very poor situation.
So I assume VC is a pretty small world. If
For
you're
sure.
a founder who makes these mistakes, will people give you another chance?
So that actually is like interesting because in most cases, if you are a first time founder and you go through and you raise money and it doesn't work out, VCs are actually more likely to fund you the second time around because I think like the odds or the percentage of it working the second time around is like, it's absurd. It's like you have like a 20% or I think it's like 10 or 20% higher chance of being successful after you've already failed at venture. On the flip side of that, if you're a fund manager and like, let's say I launched a 10 mil VC fund tomorrow, if I launched a 10 mil fund and like none of those companies like panned out, my chances of raising another fund are like virtually zero. So
True.
it's like on the fund side, you have very little wiggle room to like screw up. But on the founder side, yeah, the more you fail, the more likely a VC is actually to fund you because you've gone through the moments and the
Learned.
pitfalls that like I'm warning people about right now, right? It's like if I were doing a venture funded startup again, I would never optimize for valuation. I probably would like solely focus on like how can we build a product that's actually making money before going to raise. But a lot of founders, because it's their first time and they've never done it, they just see it as like, oh my God, VC is my only golden ticket to like get money and to like really have a chance at this. And it's like, no, you can just go out and do things. Like you can just go out and start making content and say, I'm gonna build a business around this thing and it might pan out. And if it does, go venture when it makes sense. But I think going too soon is one of the biggest pitfalls that I see from founders.
Yeah, it's definitely glamorized, the whole VC thing. It's seen as such an achievement. But ironically, people see it as the end when it's really just the beginning,
Yeah.
right? Like it's not, you're not there at all. You just signed up for a shitload of work. You know
You
what
know
I
what I
mean?
never understood is why in venture capital it is funding rounds in venture capital are more celebrated than revenue numbers.
Yeah, that's
You
true.
always see a startup, an early stage startup, mid stage, late stage. They do these crazy videos every time they raise money. Oh, we raised $10 million to build the future of super hyper intelligent sonic supersonic boom yada yada whatever buzzwords you want to put in. But when it comes to actual product and revenue, you never see these like crazy videos. And to me, that's what should be flex. Like if you made 100 million in revenue this year, you know what I want to see? I want to see a launch video where y'all are, I don't know, out in Fiji. You and the core team is in Fiji and you're celebrating. It's like we had 100 million in revenue and decided to take our team on a team bonding trip for the next month. I don't know. Do something that is in relation to we hit an actual milestone that is revenue generating instead of debt accruing. Granted, like VC is not really debt, but like raising money to me isn't an accomplishment anymore. The real accomplishment is building the product and building something generational that people want to use. And we need more of that in VC.